Hi guys, this is the Exercise Physiology Unit 2 by Aaron Sparrowhawk, and it's 2.4 adaptations. So, different events and demands. So, during this assignment, I'll be talking using different events and examples throughout. I'll be contrasting in the systems they use and the sports they play. In the assignment, I have a javelin thrower, which is using the anaerobic system for a long, and I also have an example as a long-distance runner who will be using the aerobic system. Due to the contrast in these, performers will have different demands on their body and will require to complete their sporting activity. Hopefully certain training will allow these performers to adapt, and eventually these adaptations will help them perform better. For example, one adaptation is to decrease heart rate during exercise so less oxygen is used for the heart and can be distributed around the working muscles. So, aerobic training methods. Firstly, when training the aerobic system, you have to ensure that the intensity of the training isn't too high. This is because typically you won't work as that high of an intensity as a performer. So, for example, a long distance runner needs to make sure that the intensity isn't too high. Looking at training activities, firstly, they could do circuit training, fairly low intensity. However, the key one is continuous training. And that's to have constant use of an aerobic system and constantly using that. I recommend to running 26 miles, as this will allow the aerobic system to be tested, and possibly do that 3 times a week at a low intensity. However, try to increase the run and make it harder for challenge. So this could mean adding resistance or training to pace yourself better. So, anaerobic training methods. When training anaerobically, we typically, it'll be for a very short time, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, no more than 10, 12. Firstly, weight training is a good example. It will help the body, because it's a very high intense exercise, and it will improve his strength, power in the muscles that are used during the javelin throwing action. This training will be using like high weights but a low repetition of those weights, as this is not intense but it's the best way to increase muscular strength. Also, plyometric training will allow muscles in the lower body to strengthen and become more powerful. So when throwing the javelin, you can hopefully use some of the legs when you're running up as well to get a better force on it. So that's both of those training methods done. So now we're going to move on to the cardiovascular adaptations. So, link between CV system to aerobic performance. So during aerobic activities, your CV system is just as important as your respiratory for supplying oxygen to the working muscles. So let's take a marathon runner, for example. During the activity, she'll need to have a constant supply of oxygen, which is transported via the blood. Previous to this, the blood gets ejected by the CV system, so without having a good CV system, the blood would struggle to reach the working muscles, resulting in a lack of oxygen and energy in the muscles that will constantly being used and needed by the muscles. So realistically, if you don't have a strong CV, your oxygen that's been supplied into the blood isn't actually going to reach the muscles at a quick rate. So, anaerobic benefits of CV adaptations. Obviously, there's not loads that you can really use, other than the fact that obviously your heart rate is going to increase by the more activity you use, but I think it's more to do with the recovery. So during anaerobic activities, the CV system isn't doing loads, as the CV supplies the blood for the O2, which is aerobic. However, after the anaerobic activity, the CV system will be working extremely hard to supply the blood to the muscles, so O2 debt doesn't increase. If you have a stronger CV system, blood flow will be quicker and the result recovery time will decrease, hopefully. So, VO2 max test pre and post. Here we have VO2 max test before training has happened, and as we can see, this is a very typical result, nothing special or out of the ordinary, just generally healthy. And that's actually the top line, as you can see. So just to recap, VO2 max is the maximal capacity in the individual's body to transport the use of the oxygen during incremental exercise. So, which can show us that somebody's respiratory system and CV system strengths. So, looking at the line below, we can see a marathon runner has trained for some time to decrease that line and bring it down, and now the breathing rate's decreased, so this shows us that she's being more productive with our oxygen, so she doesn't need to breathe in as much. Also, it could mean that she'll go on for longer during these races before her body struggles to give her enough oxygen. This will increase her performance and hopefully improve her results and rankings and such. This line also being lower means that the breathing rate is less, another adaptation occurring, meaning the intake of oxygen is increased, meaning more oxygen can be taken in at one time. This will mean that she'll have the maximum amount of oxygen she can have whilst running, so that actually kind of avoids fatigue in a way. So aerobic adaptations, this is mainly to do with the heart. We've got cardiac hypertrophy. So cardiac hypertrophy is a abnormal enlargement or thickening of the heart muscle, the myocardium, and that's resulting in an increase in size and changes in other heart muscles as well. So this will result in a more stronger heart, which increases the volume of blood ejected per beat, as well as how much blood can be pumped around the heart, meaning it will fill up with more blood. This happens through continuous aerobic training, as we said before, so through, and these kind of interconnect in a way. So through cardiac hypertrophy, it will lead to an increase in stroke volume. Stroke volume is the amount of blood ejected by the left ventricle in one contraction, which goes up or down depending on what you're doing and how strong your heart is. But all of this, the CV and the stronger heart, eventually equates to the increase in cardiac output, Q. Q is stroke volume times heart rate. So if you have a higher stroke volume, your Q is going to raise because it's stroke volume times heart rate. Q being higher probably means that your heart's going to be more powerful. Through all of this, our runners after continuous training for a long period of time could have our athlete's heart in which the human's heart is enlarged. So after all of that enlargement, our runner could have athlete's heart, which is simply uncommon thing. It can happen, but it's uncommon, where the human heart is enlarged, so it's actually bigger. And the resting heart rate is lower due to that, simply meaning that the CV system will be stronger and more improved. Here we have some stroke volume pre and post data. As we said before, stroke volume is the volume of blood being pumped from one ventricle per beat. So aerobic training will lead to a rise in stroke volume at rest due to the heart being trained to pump blood. This leads to an increase in blood flow, and there's an advantage as it increases speed of which blood reaches the muscles for nutrients and gives off O2 for the energy which will be used for ATP. As we can see from the trained line above, as it gets higher, there's more blood being pumped out the heart per beat, supplying O2 nutrients to the working muscles. This data is a clear improvement. Obviously, you look at the untrained line and there's a huge difference there. So here we have some heart rate pre-data. These results are heart rate statistics before a training program has been put in place for a runner. She has a fairly good CV system, and her heart values aren't dangerously high. However, they aren't strong enough to be considered near elite or strong enough to put her a high quality of performance. So we have also resting value, so resting blood temperature, resting heart rate, things that are important to look at. So we can look at things like heart rate range and stuff like that, which we'll go into later. So this is now post data and post our program. So the training's improved the runner CV system and heart rate. Obviously the line has dropped, which looks quite weird, but that means that it pretty much means that we're getting better blood flow. So hypertrophy, so the blood's not only ejected but transported quicker. So the heart doesn't have to work so hard during activities which it may have had to before training. This causes the line to drop, obviously we can see there, which means an improved heart rate, which is just another example of the data showing adaptations. We can also see a decrease in resting levels. This is because the body has become healthier, so it requires less blood, but also because our heart has become stronger. The blood pump is stronger, and it leads to an increase in time before another contraction is needed, leading to a decrease in resting heart rate levels. This is another clear adaptation, and it could again affect athletes' heart, things like that. So they all kind of interconnect in this type of thing. So heart rate range, we said this before, heart rate range isn't really an adaptation, nor is it something that happens if you can't set a goal like I'm going to train this specifically for heart rate range. Heart rate range is ever changing, depending on adaptations taking place. So the higher your heart rate range is, the better. This because it gives you more of a range to work at. So you can come off of resting. So heart rate range is pretty much your resting heart rate, and it's the gap between your resting heart rate and your max heart rate. So if I had a resting heart rate range of, let's say, 100, I don't have much of a spectrum to work at. But if I had a heart rate range of, I don't know, 130, 140, that gives me more of a, or 150, 60 even for elites, 70, 170, that gives me way more of a range to work at, so I can kind of pace myself depending on how hard I want to work, and my heart will let me do that. So, impact of heart adaptations. After all, the heart adaptations is actually allows the performer's VO2 to climb. This is because we have stronger CV, and we increase the rate of blood being thrown out of our heart, so we're sending more blood to the muscles, and in turn sending more oxygen to the muscles. So this will then be used in the working muscles, and there will be more oxygen present in the muscles, and the muscles will use this. And as a result, VO2 will begin to climb to its maximum capacity for the individual's body. This is a huge benefit for our performers, because the VO2 max is essential, because it tells the performers how much oxygen they can use, and as the VO2 max goes up, hopefully performance results will increase as well. Capillarization. So when you exercise and your body adapts, your capillary density will increase. This is also known as capillarization. Your capillaries provide your working muscles with oxygen-rich blood and remove carbon dioxide, so it's both giving blood from the oxygen and also removing waste products. So your capillary density will increase from 5% to 20% when you exercise regularly. As a result of capillarization, there's more diffusion, so there's less waste products, so that hopefully won't trigger pain or discomfort for the person, and hopefully will avoid fatigue, and that will hopefully increase performance. Red blood cell count and volume of blood. So when you begin an anaerobic exercise program, blood volume increases rapidly during the first few weeks, then eventually levels off. This initial expansion is due mostly to an increase in blood plasma, resulting in a decline in the number of red blood cells that carry hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is crucial, as hemoglobin carries oxygen to the muscles and diffuses O2 into the working muscles. This adaptation will allow an aerobic long-distance runner to have not only a stronger supply of oxygen, but a more constant supply. And obviously, as there is a high amount, there's going to be a better constant supply of hemoglobin carrying O2. This adaptation leads to another, as is red blood cells. So hopefully, as red blood cells go up, the viscosity isn't going to be as strong, and the blood isn't going to be so thick. So plasma changes and viscosity. So after a few weeks of aerobic training, red blood cells begin to increase. This leads to an increase in fluid called blood plasma, and as a result of that, blood isn't very thick. This means the heart and CV system doesn't have to work so hard to send the blood through, and doesn't have to waste so much O2, leaving more O2 for muscles and things like that. So, finally, for the CV system, training to prevent diseases. Osteoporosis, also known as coronary heart disease, is pretty much a disease in your arteries, build up of fatty material within the walls. This condition is also called osteoporosis. Obviously, as we have a stronger heart, we're going to get rid of those things, and the fat isn't going to build up so much. Osteosclerosis, the thickening and hardening of the walls of the arteries, occurring typically due to old age. But all of these diseases can be prevented by keeping and maintaining regular, consistent exercise. And this is because as we exercise, fat doesn't build up, as we said before. It's going to get rid of, it's going to be cleared and avoided and pushed away and delayed. And as our heart and CV system will be healthier, and the walls will be hard, and the walls will be better, hopefully the heart won't harden so much, and that avoids the osteoporosis.